They say your birth doesn't define you. That's a very nice thought. It's usually promoted by people whose birth certificates don't read like a plot twist from a B-movie thriller. People who have cute baby photos in albums, not in archival folders with government stamps. People who know who they are. I always thought I was one of them. My name is Christopher Lane. I'm 24 years old. Until recently. My life story was almost boringly perfect. So perfect, it could have graced the cover of a magazine about happy family life somewhere in Ohio. Born on a snowy December night. The only adored child in the family. My father, an engineer. My mother, a school teacher. A house with a white picket fence, a manicured lawn, and the perpetual smell of apple pie on Sundays. My life was a Norman Rockwell painting, a perfect slice of the American dream. Safe, predictable, and, as it turns out, built entirely on a lie. They say the past doesn't matter, only who you are now. But what if you have no idea who you are? What if the foundation your entire identity is built on is silence, a thick, heavy silence that hides the truth? I always believed I was just a regular kid, born in a small hospital. Until I opened an old wooden box in our attic, and everything, absolutely everything changed. This isn't a story about how I found myself. It's a story about how I lost myself, and about how, sometimes, the most terrifying skeleton in the closet is your own reflection in a mirror you know nothing about. Every family has its secrets, right? Some are small, others are life-altering. If you know that feeling, when the past comes knocking, or if you're just curious to see where my story goes, let me know by supporting this story. For now, let's go back to that dusty attic, where it all began. It all started with a smell. You know, the one, a mixture of mothballs, old paper, and dust that has accumulated for decades. It's the smell of things dying. The smell of my grandmother's attic. Grandma Eleanor had passed away 3 weeks earlier, quietly, in her sleep. She was a historian of forgotten things. A keeper of family junk that normal people would have thrown out long ago. And so, as the only grandchild, I was given the dubious honor of sorting through these stables of memory. My mom, her daughter, just couldn't do it. Too many memories, Chris, she'd said, her eyes filled with a genuine sadness. I understand now that the sadness wasn't just about the memories. The attic was packed to the rafters. Old suitcases, broken furniture, boxes of Christmas ornaments that hadn't seen the light of day in 30 years. I was methodically sifting through the clutter, sorting it into 3 piles: throw away, donate, and keep, just in case that last pile was growing at an alarming rate. Apparently, the pack rat gene had been passed down to me. And that's when I saw it. It was tucked under an old Singer sewing table, almost invisible in the gloom. A small wooden box, made of dark, almost black wood. Covered in such a thick layer of dust it looked gray. It was completely different from everything else. It lacked my grandmother's sentimentality. No flowers, no patterns, just a stark, functional box. On the lid was a tiny, rusted padlock. It looked more like a symbolic warning than real protection. Written across the top, in faded marker, were 3 words: Private CSCS. The initials meant nothing to me. My grandmother's name was Eleanor May Summers. No C or a. Maybe a great-grandmother's maiden name. Or an old army box of my grandfather's. I knew I shouldn't open it. It's a basic rule of decency. Private things are private for a reason, but curiosity is an itch you can't ignore. Especially when you're alone in a dusty attic, in a kingdom of dead things, and you feel like you're on the verge of uncovering a secret. Besides, the lock was purely decorative. I pried it with the blade of my pocket knife, and the shackle came off with a pathetic screech. Sorry, Grandma. Inside, there were no bundles of old cash, no love letters, no diamonds. The air that escaped didn't smell of dust, but of something else, something sterile. It smelled like a hospital. At the bottom of the box, on a lining of faded velvet, lay just a few items. The first thing I picked up was a hospital wristband, a thin strip of plastic. Yellowed with age, there was information printed on it. I held it up to the single beam of light filtering through the grimy attic window. Name: Lane, Baby Boydub, the 12th of December 1998. Physician, Dr. Maloney. Name: my date of birth, A chill ran down my spine. Why would my grandmother keep my hospital wristband in a secret box under someone else's initials? I always thought my wristband, along with my first lock of hair and my baby footprint, was in a special baby album my mom kept. Next to it was a hospital form, folded into quarters. An intake form. I unfolded it. The paper was brittle and smelled of archives. Most of the fields were blank. But at the top, in the space for ward, were two typewritten words. Two words my brain initially refused to process. Correctional ward, correctional ward. What the hell? I read the phrase several times. Maybe it's a medical term, I don't know. A translation error in my head. Maybe back in the 90s, that's what they called maternity wards for difficult cases, you know, for correcting a newborn's health. My brain desperately clung to the most absurd explanations to avoid facing the obvious. And the last item, a photograph. A Polaroid, its edges already faded. It showed a newborn baby, a red, wrinkled face, dark tufts of hair stuck to his forehead. He was wrapped in a standard hospital blanket. On the back of the photo, in the same marker as on the box lid, was written, Christopher. Day 1. It was my face. I'd seen my baby pictures. This was me. I sat on the dusty attic floor, holding the evidence of my own birth, the wristband, the form, the photo. And they all screamed one thing: correctional ward. That wasn't a hospital. It was something else. My head was ringing. The familiar world, my cozy, safe world of apple pies and manicured lawns, began to crack. And through those cracks, an icy draft of the unknown seeped in. What is a correctional ward? And why did my life begin there? At that moment, I had two choices: close the box, shove it back under the table, and pretend I never saw it, go back to my perfect, predictable life, or go downstairs and ask the woman I'd called mom my entire life one simple question. I chose the latter. And that was the beginning of the end. I walked down from the attic, each step on the old staircase echoing, not just in the house, but in my head. I clutched the three pieces of evidence in my hand: the plastic wristband, the yellowed form, and the faded photo. They felt heavy, as if cast from lead. My cozy family home suddenly felt like a movie set. Everything seemed fake: the photos on the walls, the smell of dinner cooking, even the sunlight lazily crawling across the floor. I found her in the kitchen. My mom, or, as I was beginning to suspect, the woman who had held that position for the last 24 years. She was standing at the sink, washing lettuce, humming some tune from the 70s. A picture of absolute, unbreakable peace. For a second, I froze in the doorway. Maybe I was imagining it all. Maybe I was just overtired from the attic, breathed in too much dust, and my brain decided to play a cruel trick on me. Maybe correctional ward was just a stupid, old-fashioned name for a birthing center in some rundown town. I stepped forward. A floorboard creaked out. She turned, a warm, familiar smile on her face. "Oh, Chris, honey. Done for the day. I'm just making." She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes fell on the items in my hand. The smile slid off her face as if erased. She wasn't looking at me, but at the small plastic wristband. Her face. I'd never seen it look like that. It didn't just go pale, it went ashen, as if all the blood had drained from it at once. The hands holding the lettuce trembled, and a few wet leaves fell into the sink. She slowly set the bowl on the counter, her movements stiff, robotic. Where did you get that?" Her voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't a question, it was a terrified gasp. "In the attic. In a box. Under the sewing table," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I laid the wristband, the form, and the photo on the kitchen table like an investigator presenting evidence. What is this? What is a correctional ward?" She stared at the table, but she seemed to be seeing something else. A ghost from the past that had just materialized right here, among the pots and pans. She walked around the table and sank heavily onto a chair. The way people sit when they've just been given terrible news. An eternity seemed to pass before she looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading for me to stop this conversation. "Chris, it's complicated. That phrase. It's complicated. The universal answer to all uncomfortable questions. The code for, I'm not going to explain anything, just deal with it." My composure began to crack. Complicated. I raised my voice. Not meaning to. It seems pretty simple to me. My hospital wristband, my photo, and a phrase that, according to Google, has nothing to do with hospitals. So please, explain this complication to me. She looked down again. Our fingers laced together. On the tabletop. We did it to protect you. There it was. Cliché number 2 from the How to Dodge a Question handbook. Protect me. From what? From the truth. What kind of truth requires protecting a 24-year-old man from it? Do I look like someone who's going to fall apart if I find out I wasn't born in a sterile room with a bouquet of flowers, but somewhere else? Protect me. From what? Exactly. From the fact I wasn't born in Ohio. Where was I born, Mom? In a prison. The last word slipped out, fueled by emotion. It hung in the air, toxic and terrifying. And in that moment, she broke. But not in the way I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't start shouting. She just shut down, as if an iron curtain had dropped between us. Her face became an impenetrable mask. This conversation is over, Christopher, she said quietly, but with a steel in her voice I'd only heard a few times in my life. When I had pushed her to her limit as a child, she stood up, took the evidence from the table, walked to the kitchen sink, and dropped it into the garbage disposal. I watched, stunned. She had just destroyed the only evidence. The only key to the secret of my birth. I will not discuss this, ever, she stated, not looking at me. And she went back to her salad, as if nothing had happened. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, shaking with rage and helplessness. My home was no longer mine. The woman who baked me pies had turned into a prison warden, guarding a terrible secret. Her silence was louder than any scream. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room, the same scene replaying in my head. Her ashen face, her words, "It's complicated. To protect you." She thought that by destroying the evidence, she could close the subject forever. How naive. All she did was fuel the fire. I opened my laptop. Luckily, I had memorized not just the words, but the code printed on the wristband, some serial number and letters. HF734L. I typed it into the search bar. The first few links were useless. Medical forums, archives. I was starting to think it was a dead end. But then I saw a link to an official government website, the Illinois State Archives. I clicked. The page loaded, and I saw the name, the full, official name. Not just correctional ward, medical unit of the Dwight Correctional Center, Illinois. Below was a brief description: the largest maximum security prison for women in the state of Illinois until its closure in 2013. The medical unit provided care, including childbirth services, for incarcerated women. My blood ran cold. A prison. Maximum security women's prison. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some stupid misunderstanding. The woman I had called Mom my entire life had just lied to my face. And I was born in a place where they lock up criminals. And the biggest question, the one that sent not just a chill but a wave of pure ice down my spine, was no longer where. It was who. Who was the woman that gave birth to me behind bars, the night after the conversation with my mother turned into a frantic marathon through the back alleys of the internet? The kitchen downstairs fell silent, but my mind was a raging orchestra of questions, guesses, and fear. Dwight Correctional Center. I read everything I could find about it. Its history. Photos of the grim brick buildings, articles about riots, stories from former inmates. Every word, every photo made the picture more real and more monstrous. My birth wasn't just complicated, it was part of the penitentiary system. I was a product of prison bureaucracy. Sarcasm has always been my shield. I smirked to myself. Go figure. And here I was, thinking the biggest drama of my birth was that my dad almost missed it because of a snowstorm. What a sweet, sentimental lie. The reality turned out to be far more mundane, and smelled of bleach and despair. In the morning, I went downstairs. My mother was already up. She acted as if yesterday's conversation never happened. "Good morning, dear. Want some omelet?" Her voice was even, almost cheerful. This was worse than shouting. This was the erasure of reality. She hadn't just lied, she was trying to make me believe I'd imagined it all. "No, thanks, not hungry," I replied, pouring myself some coffee. We were silent. The silence in the kitchen was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She knew that I knew. I knew that she knew that I knew. It was a silent duel, and I understood I would lose if I stayed here. Her tactic was simple: ignore the problem until it goes away. But I wasn't going to go away. My first goal was to find an official document, a birth certificate, not the pretty embossed paper they showed me as a kid, but the original source. I went to the Illinois State Archives website. Requesting a copy of a birth certificate was a matter of a few clicks and $20. I filled out the form, date of birth, place. In the place of birth field, after a moment's hesitation, I typed Dwight Correctional Center, Livingston County. My fingers trembled on the keyboard. Now, all I could do was wait. The system promised a digital copy would be mailed within a few business days. Those days dragged on like chewing gum. I wandered the house like a ghost. Any conversation with my mother was reduced to exchanging meaningless phrases about the weather. I would look at her, trying to see any hint of remorse in her face, but all I saw was a blank wall. She wasn't protecting me. She was protecting her lie. It was during one of those agonizing days of waiting that another idea came to me. Simple and obvious, like all brilliant ideas. DNA. The modern world has given us an amazing tool for uncovering family secrets: a DNA test kit. I ordered one the same day. Choosing the fastest shipping option, it felt like a declaration of war. A quiet, silent one, but no less destructive for it. The response from the archives came first. An email with a PDF attachment. I opened it with a pounding heart. The document was official and impersonal, but it contained the truth. At the top was the seal of the state of Illinois, certificate of live birth name, baby boy, date of birth, December 12, 1998, place of birth, White. Livingston County Facility, Illinois Department of Corrections. Parental information: mother, name not listed. Father, name not listed. I stared at those lines, and a strange mix of panic and relief washed over me. There it was, in black and white. I wasn't Christopher Lane. I was Baby Bull Lane, a nameless project, born into the state system. No mother, no father. Just a biological event. Recorded on paper, the rage I had felt earlier began to morph into something else. A deep, knowing emptiness. Who was I? A fragment of someone else's story, a side effect of someone else's tragedy. I printed the document and silently placed it on the kitchen table before dinner. My mother glanced at it, then at me. Fear flickered in her eyes, but she said nothing. She just pushed the paper aside and set a plate in front of me. The silent treatment continued. 2 weeks later, the DNA test results arrived. I opened the box in my room as if it were a bomb. The procedure was ridiculously simple: spit in a tube, seal it, and mail it back. I did it all with a kind of detached determination. Now I was fighting a war on two fronts: paper and genetics. Waiting for the results was torture. I checked my account on the company's website every day. Then, one evening, the page updated. Your results are ready. I clicked. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it could be heard throughout the house. The first page was the ethnicity estimate. Nothing interesting. A mix of European ancestry, typical for the Midwest. Boring. I scrolled past it to the most important part: DNA matches, your relatives. And I saw it, a list of names. Strangers, fourth cousins, third aunts, people scattered all over the country, but I wasn't looking for them. I scrolled down the page to the closest matches, and there they were, two lines that turned my world upside down for good. Carol Lane. Probable relationship, and shared DNA, 24.8% Carol Lane. That was my mom's name. The woman sitting downstairs watching TV. My mom was my aunt. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I scrolled further down. Sarah Summers. Probable relationship, mother. Shared DNA, 49.9% Sarah Summers. I had never heard that name in my life. Summers, that was Carol's maiden name. My aunt's single quotas. So, she had a sister. A sister named Sarah Ann. My biological mother. 20-4 years of a total lie. This wasn't just a deception, it was a conspiracy. An entire family production, staged for an audience of one me. My father, who was he? My aunt's husband. My uncle. Grandma Eleanor, in whose box I found the key to all this she knew. They all knew, and they all kept silent. There was a ringing in my ears. The room swam before my eyes. I stared at the name on the screen. Sarah Summers. Who are you? Where are you? And what the hell did you do to get locked up in a maximum security prison and have your name erased from our family history? The panic and emptiness vanished. In their place was a cold, crystal clear rage and determination. They didn't want to tell me anything. Fine, I would find out everything myself. Sarah Summers. That name became my obsession. I repeated it to myself, scribbled it on scraps of paper, typed it into search engines over and over again. But the internet remained silent. No social media profiles, no mentions in local news. No traces. It was as if a person with that name had never existed, but she did exist. I was the living, breathing proof. My house became an investigation headquarters. During the day, when I couldn't call her mom anymore, not even in my head, was at work, and her husband, my uncle, as it turned out, was at his office, I transformed into a private detective. My main weapons were my phone and my laptop. My adversaries were faceless clerks, bureaucratic red tape, and time. I started with the most obvious path. If Sarah Summers gave birth to me at the Dwight Correctional Center, there had to be a file on her, a court file, a prison file. And then I stumbled upon 3 magic words: Freedom of Information Act FOIA. It sounded promising, a law that gives any citizen the right to request access to government agency records, including the archives of the Department of Corrections. This was my chance. The process turned out to be mind-numbingly tedious. I spent days learning how to properly file a FOIA request. You had to be precise, to phrase the request in a way that gave the clerk no reason to deny it. My request was as specific as I could make it. I request any and all publicly available records pertaining to an inmate named Sarah Summers, incarcerated at the Dwight Correctional Center between 1997 and 1999, including but not limited to information on charges, court sentencing, and date of admission to the facility. I mailed the request to the Illinois Department of Corrections archive. I received an automated reply: your request has been received and will be processed within the statutory time frame. Statutory time frame is another one of those brilliant phrases that could mean anything from a week to an eternity. The most agonizing part began: the waiting. The days blurred together. I barely left my room. The relationship with Carol and her husband reached a freezing point. We existed in the same space, but in different universes. They pretended everything was fine, that their perfect family still existed. I pretended to believe them, but my silence was heavy and accusatory. Sometimes, I would catch Carol looking at me. Her gaze was a mixture of fear, guilt, and a desperate sorrow. Maybe she wanted to talk. Maybe she was waiting for me to come and demand answers again. But I remained silent. I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I wanted facts. Cold, impartial facts from a prison archive. Sometimes, the absurdity of it all would make me laugh. Here I was, Christopher Lane, a guy who a month ago was worried about college grades and what to have for dinner. Now I was waiting for the prison file of my inmate mother. Life has a way of throwing you curveballs, doesn't it? My inner sarcasm was the only thing keeping me sane. 3 weeks later, when I had almost given up hope, an email arrived. The subject line: response to your FOIA request. The email contained a link to a secure portal and a password. I followed the link, entered the password. A list of scanned documents appeared on the screen. Just a few PDF files. My hands trembled as I opened the first file. It was a court order. The State of Illinois versus Sarah Summers, Case No. 97CR-816. Date, May 15, 1997. I scanned the dry legal text. The charge, the sentence, the details. Charge: involuntary manslaughter. I froze. Manslaughter, even if it was involuntary. The word burned through the screen. I read on, digging into the details of the case outlined in the report. They were sparse, devoid of emotion, but that made them even more horrifying. Sarah Summers was 19 years old. 19. She was in a relationship with a man named Mark Renner. The report described him as her cohabitant. The attached Police report was more candid. Testimony from neighbors, frequent screaming, fights, signs of abuse that Saren had tried to hide. A classic, ugly story of domestic violence. On the night of April 12, 1997, tragedy struck. According to Saran's testimony, Renner had come home drunk. Another fight started. He attacked her. She, defending herself, pushed him away. He lost his balance, fell, and hit his head on the corner of the fireplace mantel. He died instantly. She called the police herself. She didn't try to run or hide anything. She was just sitting on the floor next to the body when the first patrol car arrived. Her lawyer argued self-defense, but the prosecutor built a case on her using excessive force. At the time, she was 2 months pregnant with me. The prosecutor probably used that as an aggravating factor, arguing she should have been thinking about the baby instead of getting into a fight. The perverse logic of it was sickening. The jury found her guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Sentence: 7 years in prison. Place of incarceration: Dwight Correctional Center. I leaned back in my chair. I couldn't breathe. There was a roaring in my ears. My mother wasn't a monster, not a cold-blooded killer. She was a victim, a 19-year-old girl, scared, beaten, and pregnant. She was defending herself. And the system that was supposed to protect her had chewed her up and spit her out. There was one more document in the file. A brief summary from her prison record. Name: Summers, Saran, inmate number 785B12, date of admission June 20, 1997, special notes, pregnant. And the last entry, dated December 12, 1998. The day I was born. Event: live birth. Newborn male transferred to representatives of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services per protocol. Transferred, like a package, like an object. It was then that I understood the full depth of my family's conspiracy. Carol and her husband didn't just adopt me. They took me from the foster care system and officially, quietly, they erased all the tracks, moved to another state, gave me a different last name. They didn't adopt an orphan. They stole the child of their own sister, their own daughter. They stole her from me, and me from her. Why? To protect me from the truth, or to hide their own shame. So the neighbors wouldn't whisper behind their backs that their relative was a convicted killer. My rage shifted its target again. Now it was aimed not just at the lie, but at their selfishness, their cowardice. I sat in the silence of my room, and the rain outside seemed to weep for the story of a 19-year-old girl named Saran, a story that had been hidden from me for 24 years, and I knew my investigation wasn't over. It had just begun. I had found the documents. Now I had to find the person. The prison file lay printed on my desk. A stack of paper that weighed a ton. Involuntary manslaughter. 7 years. Inmate number 785B12. Those words and numbers were seared into my brain. I stared at them, trying to see a living person behind the soulless font. A 19-year-old girl, my mother. I knew what happened before I was born, but what happened after? The documents ended with my birth. Transferred to representatives of the Department of Children and Family Services. What about her? What happened to Saran Summers after they took her baby away? My internet search entered a new phase. Now, I wasn't looking for official documents, but for people. I dove into a world of online communities I never knew existed. Forums for ex-convicts, support groups for the families of the incarcerated, websites dedicated to finding lost relatives. It was a digital imprint of human pain, a shadow internet where people shared stories that would make the average person's hair stand on end. At first, I was shooting in the dark. I posted anonymous messages looking for information about a woman who served time at Dwight Correctional Center in the late 90s. The replies were rare and useless. The justice system knows how to keep its secrets. But then I found it. A small, old-fashioned forum that looked like its design hadn't changed since 1999. It was called Behind the Wall Voices and Memories. It was run by former corrections officers and social workers. They shared experiences, discussed reforms, and reminisced about the past. I spent hours scrolling through old discussion threads, and in one of them, dedicated to medical care in women's prisons in the 90s. I saw a post from a user with the handle nurse_Martha72. She wrote about her time working in the medical unit at Dwight. My heart started to pound. I registered on the forum and sent her a private message. I tried to be as cautious as possible, not revealing all my cards. Hello, I'm conducting some personal research related to my family's history. My biological mother may have been in the Dwight Medical Unit in 1998. I know this is a long time ago and you probably don't remember much, but her name was Sarah Ann Summers. She gave birth to a child there in December of 1998. Does that name mean anything to you? I hit send and prepared to wait. Days, weeks. Maybe she didn't even use the forum anymore. A reply came 2 days later. From nurse_Martha7 to subject, Ray Dwight. 1998. Yes. I remember her. I can't say I knew her well, but I remember that name. I couldn't breathe. This was it, the first living thread to the past. I immediately wrote back, asking her to tell me anything she remembered. Any little detail. We exchanged a few more messages, and she agreed to talk on the phone. The next day, I was sitting in my room, clutching my phone in a sweaty hand. I dialed the number. After a few rings, a calm, slightly weary female voice answered. This is Martha. Hello, Martha. This is Christopher. We messaged on the forum. Oh yes, Christopher. I remember. You're the boy, yes. Sarah's baby. We all knew she was pregnant. It's hard to hide something like that. I asked questions, and she answered. Her voice was steady, professional, like someone accustomed to tragedy. As she spoke, images began to flicker to life in my mind, like an old film. Sarah Ann, she said, wasn't like most of the other inmates. Quiet, withdrawn, she barely spoke to anyone. We called them ghosts, Martha said. They just do their time. Day by day, trying to be invisible. She told me that Sarah Ann had one talent. She drew, constantly, on scraps of paper, on napkins, on the back of official forms. Mostly pencil sketches, faces, landscapes from memory. She was very gifted, Martha said. Sometimes she would show me her drawings. There was so much life in them, so much light. It was hard to believe they were drawn by someone in a maximum security prison. What did she say about her case? About me? I asked, my voice cracking. About her case, never. That topic was taboo for her. But about you, she spoke about you all the time. Not with words. She drew the nursery she would never see, the toys she would never buy. She drew your face, imagining what you would look like. She called you my little light, my little light. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. All my manufactured rage, all my sarcasm, it all crumbled to dust. All that was left was a ringing pain. What happened to her after the birth? I managed to force out. It was hard. Martha's voice grew quieter. We saw it more than once. They take the babies right away. Sometimes they let the mother hold them for a few hours. Sometimes not. They let Sarah. I remember her sitting on her cot, just looking at you. Not crying, just looking. And then the people from social services came, and that was it. It was like a switch was flipped inside her. The light she had was gone. And then, what happened then? Did she serve out her sentence? That's where it gets strange, Martha replied. About 6 months after you were born, she was transferred. It was unusual. Inmates aren't usually transferred without a compelling reason. Her file just had a note to transfer to another facility for administrative reasons. It didn't say where. We all thought it was some kind of rehabilitation program or something. She just vanished. One morning, her bunk was empty. Her things were gone. That was it. No one at Dwight ever saw or heard from her again. Double quotes vanished. The word hung in the air. Not released, not dead. Just vanished from the system. I tried to find out what happened to her later, Martha added, out of pure curiosity. I had a few connections, but nothing, no transfer records. No trace of her in other prisons, no death certificate, no new address after her supposed release. It was as if a person named Sarah Ann Summers had evaporated. We talked for a little while longer. I thanked her. She wished me luck. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Now the mystery was even deeper. My mother didn't just serve her time, she was secretly transferred to an unknown location. And all traces of her were meticulously erased. This didn't seem like a standard bureaucratic procedure anymore. This felt like a special operation, and I realized my investigation had moved beyond a family secret. This was something bigger. Something someone very powerful wanted to hide. Suddenly, I no longer just wanted answers. I wanted to find her alive. The conversation with Nurse Martha changed everything. Until that point, my investigation had been like solving a puzzle, cold, analytical, fueled by anger and a sense of betrayal. But Martha's words, "She called you my little light," had pierced my armor. They transformed the abstract inmate number 785/12 into my mother. Into a woman who had waited for me, drawn me, loved me before she even saw me. And this new, sharp pain made the continued silence unbearable. The staring contest with Carol was over. I didn't just need the facts I had already dug up. I needed an answer to the question, why? And only one person could give me that answer. I waited for the evening. Carol's husband, my uncle, was away at a conference for a few days. We were alone in the house. The perfect moment. I went down to the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, sorting through the mail. She was wearing the same house sweater I'd known her in my whole life. She looked up, and I saw the usual mix of wariness and hope that I would just walk past. But I didn't. I sat in the chair opposite her. A stack of junk mail and bills lay on the table between us. "We need to talk," I said. My voice sounded foreign. To calm. She slowly put the papers down. "Christopher, I thought we didn't decide anything," I interrupted. You decided to stay silent, but I'm not playing this game anymore." I laid out everything I had on the table. The copy of my real birth certificate, the printout of the DNA test results, the copy of Sarah Summers' court sentence. I spread the papers out like cards in some devilish game. She looked at the papers, her face turning to stone with each new sheet. By the time I was done, she looked as if she had aged 10 years. "Sarah Summers," I said the name out loud. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. "Your younger sister. My biological mother. Involuntary manslaughter. 7 years in Dwight. The birth of a child, me. And her mysterious disappearance from prison 6 months later." Did I miss anything? She was silent. Her gaze was fixed on the court sentence. "I want to know why, Carol," he continued, using her first name for the first time. "Why did you do all this? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, cracked. "We wanted to give you a normal life." "And normal life," I laughed bitterly. "You call a life built on a lie normal? You took everything from me, my name, my history, my mother. We didn't take her from you." She raised her voice for the first time, and it was filled with desperation. "We were saving you. Do you have any idea what would have happened to you? The foster care system, orphanages, foster homes, you would have been shuffled from place to place like an object, and you would have been branded the son of a killer. We gave you a home, a family, love. Doesn't that mean anything?" There was a twisted logic in her words, the logic of fear. All my life, I thought my mom was a strict but kind woman. She checked my homework, cared for me when I was sick, taught me how to ride a bike, drove me to soccer practice. She was a mom, in every sense of the word. She didn't give birth to me, but she raised me. She chose me. And yet, you talk about love, I said, trying to stay calm. But love isn't built on deceit. Love is trust. And you destroyed that. You didn't just hide the truth. You erased a person. Your own sister. What happened to her, Carol? Where did she disappear?" She looked away. "I don't know." "Don't lie to me. Stop lying." I slammed my palm on the table. The stack of bills jumped. "She gets secretly transferred from prison, and all traces vanish. That doesn't just happen. You had to know. You and Dad. I mean, your husband. You got me out of the foster system somehow. You must have had connections." She stared out the window at the dark garden, and then she began to cry. Not hysterically, but quietly, soundlessly. Tears just rolled down her cheeks. "She wanted this herself," she whispered. I froze. What, after they took you, she broke? Carol said, staring into space. She wrote us letters, desperate, filled with pain. She knew that after her release, she would have no chance of getting you back. You would give a child to a former convict. She was afraid you would grow up knowing your mother was a killer. She didn't want to ruin your life. She turned her tear-streaked face to me. It was her idea. She found a way, through some lawyer, some witness protection type program. I don't know all the details. They offered her a deal, a complete disappearance, a new life, new documents, a new name, in exchange for completely renouncing her past. Renouncing you, she took it. For you, Chris, she gave up her own existence, so that you could have a normal life. I sat there stunned. I hadn't expected this. My mother hadn't just disappeared. She had sacrificed herself. She had erased herself from the face of the earth so that I could live without the stain of her past. She asked us for one thing, Carol continued, sobbing, that we raise you as our own son. That you would never find out the truth. That you would be happy. We gave her our word, and we kept it. For 24 years, all my rage evaporated. In its place was only emptiness and a hollow, all-consuming sadness. Sadness for the mother I never knew, but who loved me so much she was able to give me up. And sadness for the woman sitting across from me, who had carried the burden of this lie her entire life. She was a victim of that promise, too. Who was I to judge her? Yes, she lied to me, but she did it out of love. A twisted, misguided love, but love nonetheless. She gave me everything she could, but roots you can't replace. Roots. There's an emptiness that forms where you've been torn from your native soil. An emptiness that no amount of apple pie or care can fill. So who am I loyal to? The truth, no matter how ugly, or the woman who raised me? Where is she? I asked quietly. It was the last question. Carol shook her head. I don't know, honestly. That was part of the deal. No contact. No traces. She just left. For you, I stood up from the table. The conversation was over. I had my answer to why. And that answer was more complicated and more painful than I could have ever imagined. Asterisk, I was born in a place built to keep people silent, and walls saturated with silence and suppressed secrets. The irony is that this silence followed me my whole life, even outside the prison walls. It lived in my home, sat at my dinner table, hid in the caring eyes of the woman I called Mom. But silence is a poor foundation for a life. Sooner or later, it cracks. Mine cracked because of an old wooden box. I still live in the same house, with Carol, with her husband. After that conversation in the kitchen, something changed. The tension has eased, but it's been replaced by an awkward, fragile quiet. We don't play happy family anymore. We are three people, bound by a single, complex, tragic story, and we are learning to live with it. I look at Carol and I don't see a liar, but a woman who carried an impossible burden, given to her by her sister. I can't forgive her, not yet, but I think I'm starting to understand her. I still don't know where my real mother is. Sarah Summers, the woman who drew my face without ever seeing it. The woman who called me her little light. The woman who erased herself from the world so that this light would not be extinguished. Sometimes at night, I lie awake and think about her. Where is she now? Is she happy? Does she still remember that December day in the prison medical ward? Does she think of me? Sometimes I feel like I can sense her, like a phantom limb pain, an ache where my roots should be. I don't know why she disappeared so mysteriously. Maybe Carol's version is the truth, or maybe there's something more, some detail hidden even from her. Maybe the man she was defending herself from wasn't so simple. Maybe his death pulled on strings I can't even begin to imagine. That part of the story is still shrouded in darkness. But I know one thing. I'm not the boy I thought I was, not Christopher Lane from a perfect family in Ohio. I am the nameless infant from a prison record. I am the son of Sarah Summers. I am a person who found the truth buried in a dusty box. And I am not done searching. Maybe I'll never find her. Maybe she doesn't want to be found, but the search has changed me. It has made me understand that identity isn't something you're given at birth. It's something you build yourself, piece by piece. From the rubble of truth and lies, of pain and love, I look at my reflection in the mirror and I no longer see a simple guy. I see my mother's eyes. I see her strength, her sacrifice. My story began in silence, but I will not let it end there. If you're out there somewhere, Mom, I'm still your son. And I want to know who you really were. I want to hear your story in your own voice, and I will keep searching, no matter how long it takes. This story, it isn't over. Not for me, and maybe not for some of you. I'm sure many of you have your own skeletons in the closet, or questions left unanswered. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in my place? Would you keep searching? Your perspective really matters. And of course, if you want to hear a continuation, or other stories just as tangled as this one, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. Thank you for listening.